Carla Connor had a job built for decision. You could see it when she was working the numbers at the factory, when she bartered terms over a supplier's invoice, when she listened to a worker's grievance and turned it into a logistics problem she would solve before lunch. People called her strong because she moved the world, not because she wanted to. Strength for Carla was utility. Make a plan, put it in motion, close the loop. Emotion was something she tolerated when it arrived, quietly, like an uninvited guest who did the dishes. Tonight, she was bone-tired. Underworld's ledgers had been a mess all week, old debts revealed in fluorescent light. The kind of mess where human lives hide under invoices. Yet she had fought through it. Because that's what she did, then taken a detour to the pub to catch up on what the street had decided about modern life and potholes. There had been jokes and a pint and a half-hearted argument about council tax. And then she had come home and forgotten, briefly, that there are things equilibrium cannot smooth. Becky MacDonald, Becky Connor to some, but the street kept the old name because it suited their memories, had been in and out of Carla's life in 1,000 helpful ways. She had a mouth that could both bruise and heal. She'd been the first to send Carla a stew when deadlines threatened to smother her. Becky was loud, earnest, and dangerous in the way that generosity can be dangerous. She gave people more than they had, and sometimes let herself be broken a little trying to keep everyone whole. Their relationship, like any that had to survive Weatherfield, had weathered storms. They had patched, argued, forgiven, and built again. But that bridge had been shod in resilience, and tonight it was under tremor from an entirely different source. Undercurrent began in the afternoon, in an office across from the cobbler's, where a man with a tidy beard and a neat head of charm had leaned back and smiled in the way people who sell persuasion do. Jason Heath, property developer, voice that told you the world was salvageable if you agreed to his terms, had made an offer. It began innocently with a proposal to buy a small strip of Connor-owned property to expand the car park near Underworld. The space was practical. Little more than pavement and a weeping lamppost, but it had been earmarked for a community garden, a seed of something for local volunteers and children's programs, much of it thanks to Becky's pleading. Becky had always been the bridge between what Carla could arrange and what the neighborhood needed. She organized food drives, she collected warm jumpers in winter, she believed the world could be nudged to be kinder. To Jason, kindness was a variable. It could be monetized, or it could be extolled for PR. Jason's men came down with glossy brochures and sandwiches. They leaned on the counter at the cabin and quoted zoning laws as if the laws were delicate flowers they wanted to water. Carla had heard the offer. She had heard the numbers. They were practical. They would offset a new batch of overheads and cover training costs for night shift workers. They would also mean that the community garden never happened. You sell it, you get money. You don't, you have a patch of grass that kids will step in and ruin, said a voice that liked to make moral choices sound like poor investments. It was an argument that could be made purely in ledgers. But in Carla's life, ledgers had people attached to their entries. The decision on paper would change a dozen small routines, where school children would learn to plant seeds, where elderly neighbors might sit, where Becky would shepherd volunteers. Becky had been fierce in her opposition. You can't just buy up the corner and call it progress, she had said at the cabin, palms flat on the table like a woman grounding herself. People need a place to breathe. Kids need to learn to grow something that's theirs. Her eyes had had the look of someone who had been given too many reasons to be small and decided, finally, not to be. Carla had tried to mediate. She'd sat in meetings, she'd argued for a deal that included a community fund. She'd insisted that any sale must include a clause that guaranteed local use of the land in perpetuity. Jason smiled and offered a clause that read like a promise but behaved like a loophole. Trusteeships could be dissolved on technicalities. In perpetuity is a phrase lawyers clip and twist. Then what happened? What made the rain at evening feel like judgment was a press release. Jason, strategic in his charm, had issued a soft news item celebrating community collaboration. It quoted Becky as working with local philanthropists to improve urban greenery. Becky had not spoken with Jason about such phrasing. She hadn't been on the record. The quote attributed to her had a tinge of consent that she had not given. The community read it as a betrayal. Carla read it as a deliberate manipulation.